Hello everyone, this is POW Ponder on Weather. In this update, we have Invest 94 that has developed that looks to form into Tropical Storm Bonnie by next week. Plus, we also have a potential storm in the Gulf that may develop as well. Welcome back everyone, happy Friday out there. This is your tropical update. Things look to become really active over the next 7 to 10 days. So let's delve into the details. If you are new to the channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's take a look at the overall satellite picture this afternoon, and we've got a lot happening right now. This is right now Invest 94L out here in the open waters of the Atlantic. This is going to be traversing westbound over the coming days and looks to become active and really start impacting the islands here around Trinidad, into Grenada, into Barbados, as well as into Barbuda here in Antigua over the coming days, of really in the next 5 days. And this will continue traversing westbound, eventually possibly impacting portions of Jamaica. Then we also have just copious amounts of rain that's really been impacting Panama down into Costa Rica and Nicaragua, just man, over the last month. And we also have another strong tropical wave. It's really rare for this time of year, coming off the coast of Africa, and that's also heading westbound as well. So you definitely see things are starting to get active in the tropics. So let's take a look at what we're working with here. So this is the latest update from the National Hurricane Center. We do have a formidable tropical wave out there in the eastern tropical Atlantic. It does have about a 60% chance of forming into a tropical storm, and the next one will be getting the name Bonnie as this continues to traverse westbound. Now it's got a lot of clearance, and what I mean by that is the runway is pretty open for this particular system. We've got a developing ridge of high pressure that's going to be over in the northern parts of the Atlantic, and that should actually help steer this system and keep it westbound, mainly following this 591 and 580 areas right here, continue to traversing westbound. Now, the fly in the ointment is essentially depends on the strength of this ridge. If this is a little bit weaker ridge, that will actually help steer, not only westbound, will actually help pull this system a little bit further north. If this is actually a stronger ridge, then that will actually keep it westbound and eventually headed into portions of, say, a Nicaragua over the next 7 to 10 days. But it's got a lot of not even hardly any shear, so it's got a lot of open waters to work with. There's not much going to be stopping this thing to really developing, if not almost rapidly developing, because there's not typically too much to get in its way. So you can definitely see down here into the open waters of the Caribbean, once we pass the islands here, this darker blue, there's almost little to no shear to work with this environment. So it should start getting its act together by the time we get into next week, early next week, and probably become Tropical Storm Bonnie. And then once it gets out into the Caribbean, man, all bets are off, because some guidance models are actually pretty bullish with this system. And as it continues to traverse westbound, you can really see much of the Caribbean, and actually much of the Caribbean right now is actually not have that much shear to maybe stop this thing from being a formalized storm. And also the dust out there is really kind of subsided. We dealt with a lot of that African dust over the last 4 to 6 weeks, but here lately, and definitely by towards the end of the month, there's not much there's not much shear to kind of rip this thing up. There's no shear and there's no dust to kind of rip this thing apart. So it's got an open runway, if you will. Once this thing does tighten up and develop, there's not going to be much to stop this thing from continuing to develop and actually intensify. Some models are pretty bullish with this system. In fact, here's the latest ensemble member guidance, has mainly all members of the European guidance continuing to traverse this westbound. It more or less gets into the islands here in about 3 to 5 days, right? So I think that's when that will become Tropical Storm Bonnie by then. And again, depending on the strength of this ridge, most of the ensemble members keep it more or less on a more southern track and keep it going on, westbound, really inhibiting the really high pressure in the ridge over the top. But there are some signs it could weaken that ridge over the top in north of Atlantic. Here's the latest GFS ensemble member guidance. Has a little bit more, ensembles have it a little bit further south, going through south of Jamaica and entering portions of Nicaragua here. But it also has more ensembles lifting a little bit further north, maybe favoring a more weaker ridge to the north as well. We're in rare territory, guy. This is the month of June. We're not even supposed to be talking about storms or active tropical waves that come off the Cape Verde Seas and off the African coast. This house shows you how rare it is. This is all the storms that have formed since records have started out here into the open waters of the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. And if not most, everything has formed well into the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico and along the East Coast here. This is where potential Bonnie will form, well out here in the open water. So we're basically in no man's land for June standards. If this were to come to fruition, this would be a rare event. So it's definitely rare that we're even talking about active tropical system out here in the open waters of the Atlantic so early in the season. And this may not even be the only one. There's a formidable wave back behind it that looks pretty nasty as well. So but look at the latest intensity guidance, right? This is why I'm talking about this way early, so to give you plenty of time to prepare for this system. Most, if not all, guidance has this going into a tropical storm within the next 72 to say 96 hours. In the next 3 to 5 days, National Hurricane Center has about a 60% chance of that happening, right? Beyond that, there's more models now showing, hey, we could at least be a category 1 hurricane. And there's actually some guidance saying, hey, we're going to be not going to stop there. We actually might go into a category 3 major hurricane. So this has the possibility with less shear, not much dust to work with, ridge over the top, got all the pieces of the puzzle to work with. Say, hey, this could be a formidable system down the line. So let's take a look at the overall MJO as well, because that's also in a favorable phase. Right now, this is the Man and Julie oscillation, and we're looking at June 24th, right? This is right in the heart of phase 2. That is an active phase for the MJO, and if not, phase 3 is also active as well. So for the next 2 weeks, the MJO, the Man and Julie oscillation, is in an active phase. Now, what does actually mean? So here's the overall anomaly saying, hey, if it does form, where does it likely, what's the most likelihood where it would potentially go in phase 2, where it is right now? Well, phase 2 actually favors a little bit weaker ridge. So it would be, kind of shifting a little bit further north than some of the more guidance has right now, the southern track. If it does kind of favor that phase 2 track, this would lift it over Jamaica, over the Cayman Islands, and lift it into the Gulf of Mexico, possibly heading towards the southeast, towards Florida. That would favor a phase 2 track. Now, if it favors a phase 3 track, it's got a little bit of a more of a western track, more of a western Caribbean, western Gulf of Mexico track. But either way, most ensemble members are right in line right now, this far out, between phase 2 and phase 3. So it's just the turn on the weakness, the strength of that ridge. Once it actually gets into the Caribbean, past that 5 days, is the uncertainty right now where it's actually going to be ended up going. But there's also going to be another potential system out here into the Gulf of Mexico. So we've been talking about this coastal low on my channel for several days. This little mesoscale convective system that came off into the open waters of the Atlantic here, now it formed into a split low. A piece of that energy went out to sea, but there's also another piece of that energy that's coming in that's going to be impacting Florida over the next couple of days with the heavier rain showers. That mesoscale convective system will continue to traverse and head out into the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. At the same time, we've got that cold front, that little cool down that we've been talking about, heading all the way down into the deep south. Not much cooler air to continue with once it moves further and further south. But there's a lot of indications that front will get further south enough. Hey, we could be with combination of that mesoscale convective system, we could have a low pressure system forming right off the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico, just right offshore by Tuesday, right? So if that does form, it's got a lot of, well above average sea surface temperature anomalies to contend with. This area is rapidly intensified. A lot of these areas are especially just right off the coast there, 88, 89, 90 degrees, right? So if it does form into a low, you always have to look for tail ends of the fronts, especially this time of year. And I showed you where most tropical storms do form in the month of June. So we'll also have another potential system that actually could develop a low pressure system, into the Gulf of Mexico by the early part of next week. So let's kind of break this down and take a look at the overall EPS guidance. Pretty bullish, right? It's pretty bullish 5 days out. It's got about a 90% chance, if not almost 100% chance, of Tropical Storm Bonnie potentially forming right here by the islands here. And then once it gets into the islands, it is going to continue to traverse westbound. But it's also got about a 20 to 30% chance of that little system, that tail end of the front, combined with that mesoscale system, that could form some sort of low pressure system right off the coast of Texas, right off the coast of Louisiana by the time we get to Tuesday of next week. Now, that's not the only model that's showing it. This is also the GFS model, also has a low pressure system down to a 10, 12 millibar low pressure system. Not very active, right? I mean, it's still a low pressure system, but it's really just right off the coast, taking advantage of those really, well above average sea surface anomalies for this time of year. And the Canadian model sent basically the same thing. So we're starting to see more and more model congruency. We've been talking about this for 2 days now, and it looks like more models are really starting to come on board with this potential system that could try to develop a low pressure center. And the Icon model's the same way. So we're looking at 4 formidable global models saying, hey, we could have a low pressure system front stalling off in the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Plus we have that MCS combined, and we could be looking at a little spin up action headed into Tuesday of next week. So here's the big picture. This is what we're working with. Here's the latest Icon guidance. All right, so if this does in fact does form into a low pressure, this is along a cold front, right? This could actually help weaken the ridge that's over the North Atlantic, right? So if this does actually develop into a low pressure in the Gulf of Mexico, this will influence the storm development and the movement of what Invest 94, which will be Bonnie by then, as it goes into the Caribbean. So if this does form, it's going to favor a little bit more northern track of what it seems to be right now, because this has not formed yet in the models. So yes, if this does come to fruition, this will pull this system back behind it a tad bit further north and lift it further north and kind of hook it towards essentially over Jamaica in about 7 days. So definitely be on high alert with this system in the Caribbean. So here's the latest just preliminary rainfall totals. This is very preliminary, but if something like that were to form just off the coast with those warm waters right off the sea surface temperatures, it would send copious amounts of rainfall right along the coast. And so a lot of these areas do need rainfall big time, right? But it might be a lot. These systems, whether it gets named or not, could be producing some pretty significant rain producers. So we'll just have to watch this. I'll be doing daily updates on this channel with these particular 2 systems to keep you well ahead of the storm. So definitely tune in daily in the afternoons with all these updates that are going to be coming. And so here's the latest GFS guidance on the wind swap, right? So this one has it a little bit further south, right? So, but it takes it up almost to basically a major hurricane potentially over the next 7 days right now. So I'm not too keen on operational runs this far out, but I'm just kind of showing you the different model guidance, what we have to work with. And here's the latest Canadian model, kind of the same deal. It actually favors a little bit weaker ridge and pulls it well further north, heading towards Cuba. So there's still a lot of uncertainty, obviously, right now. Once it gets past the Lesser Antilles and the Windward Islands out here into the Caribbean. Here's the latest Icon. which I'm actually kind of favoring this particular setup with the development right off the coast here into the Gulf of Mexico. This would influence this system to be pulled further north, and it would take it further north. So if this were to come to fruition, this would be impacting potentially Jamaica by the time we get into a week from now, with a tropical storm system that would be eventually maybe heading towards the Cayman Islands and take more of a northern track. It only goes out 180 hours, but if this continues, this would be impacting the island Jamaica in about 7 days. So here's the latest European guidance on the satellite picture. Has a formidable eye with this particular system. So right now I'm kind of crossed between the European and the icon model, but really favoring the icon with this particular system, because I do feel there's going to be a low pressure system that's going to be developing off the coast into the Gulf of Mexico by about Tuesday. Once that happens, that system will be in the Caribbean by then, and then I think it'll be pulled and kind of steered further north than what a lot of the ensemble members on the GFS and the European guidance is right now. So definitely be on the lookout for that. I'll be doing daily updates on this channel to keep you well ahead of the storm. I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me in the next update where I protect you before and after the storm.